Today's patient is a 1980 old Ford pickup truck, 7.3 diesel, ATS turbo. And last time I had it out, I was pulling my equipment trailer with a heavy load on it, and I had a complete and catastrophic loss of brakes, which shouldn't happen on a dual master cylinder setup. So the master cylinder is bad. But before we get into that, what I'm going to do is a full brake inspection all the way around this thing on all four wheels. And what I'll capture on video is doing the driver's side here, because obviously the passenger side will be identical. So we will go through a dual piston caliper disc brake in the front and a drum brake on the rear of a Sterling 3/4 ton axle. And then we will get to the master cylinder. So let me get set up and we'll get right back. Okay. First impressions are there's plenty of pad left on that shoe. Plenty of cobwebs available too. It's not going to run out of cobwebs. The disc isn't gouged, but it looks like up here might have a little bit of hard spots in it. Probably got it a little bit hot because it does kind of smell too. But some hot brake and pulling a load's normal. I did not lose my brakes because of heat. I had zero pressure. Pedal went to the floor. It wouldn't pump back up. They were gone. I may have mistakenly said dual master cylinder earlier in the intro. What I meant was a dual chamber master cylinder, so you have front brakes and rear brakes. So you should not lose all brakes with that type of master cylinder. One or the other, but both is very, very rare. That tells me the master cylinder itself failed and isn't retaining its pressure. And it smells down here too, so it did get hot. But I am going to pull the caliper off. We'll get a better look at the shoes. We'll get a better look at the pads, and we'll look at the pistons, make sure they're traveling freely and that they're not leaking. So, what does it use? That's right. It's been a while since I've done one of these. One bolt down here, and it should slide off. It should swing out and come off. Try to show you what I'm talking about. The bottom of the caliper. There's a bolt right here. That comes off. Then this unit will slide out. That'll allow the whole caliper to drop and come off. You also got a view of the pads in there. You can see they're still pretty healthy. Look at that though. The boot is burned off of that piston there, bottom one, and much better. So right away we're finding other problems. Okay, let's take a look. Yeah, I had my flatbed equipment trailer behind here, and I had that F250. That's in a different video, an earlier video, where I did the intake manifold on the back of that. And I'm going down Highway 299 from the coast, 160 miles from here. And we're going down one of the grades, one of the first grades, which is a pretty bad one. And the pedal just went to the floor. There's no pumping it up. Nothing, it was just gone. I just started on the grade too, and again it wasn't because of heat, because you don't lose pressure over heat. And even if you did, I hadn't been on the grade long enough to get hot. Be right back. I'm gonna have to tap that out with a hammer. This truck has a good parking brake, but not good enough to stop that kind of load. But fortunately it is a manual transmission, so I was able to gear it down in the low, pull over in a wide spot on the side of the road, and use the park brake for the rest. So I got the bolt out, and I'm just driving this bracket out, and there's a tensioner in there too that helps keep tension on it, and then the whole caliper will drop down that much and come off. This truck's obviously a four-wheel drive, but the same design is used on the two-wheel drives too, so very common setup for a Ford truck. So I got out and crawled around under the truck looking for a leak maybe sprung somewhere. And nothing, everything's dry. Master cylinder's full. Okay, so there's that bracket, and there's that tensioner. So out of desperation, just bled the master cylinder. Brakes came back, 100% working great. We made it for quite a while, it was maybe another third of the trip or so, maybe a little longer. Got into a road construction area, one lane traffic, and the brakes went out again, and there was nowhere to pull over. So I just dragged way back, so I was nowhere near the people in front of me, in case I had to ditch it, and just drove really slow. By the time we came out of the construction and found a place to pull over, the brakes just started working on their own again. They stayed working the rest of the trip home. Okay, so like on any vehicle, when you pull the rotor off. It's good to have a bungee cord or a piece of wire to suspend it. You don't want to drag it from the brake hose. You know what? I think that was on fire. It smells like it, and it looks like, yeah, ash. That's strange, because if those things burned up, I don't think it was on that trip, because I didn't get my brakes hot on that trip. I had in the past. That must have been when that happened. So that's a distinct smell. You would know that if that's happening. So, yeah, I think I fried them earlier. So, it's not going to be just a master cylinder change. It's like I'm due for a caliper unless I can rebuild this one. Okay, so these are the pistons that push out when you push down on the brake. The hydraulic fluid fills these reservoirs up and pushes these pistons out, and that engages the brake. On most vehicles you'll just see one piston in the middle, but a larger truck like this, it's got a dual piston to give you a little extra braking power. Anyway, either way, you should be able to push these in. Not terribly easily, but yeah, see how that's going in? That's alright. And that's alright too. If it's jammed so tight you can't compress them any. And by the way, you'll lose a little brake fluid when you do this because you're pushing it back through the master cylinder. Then you need a new rotor. A piston has to be able to travel. If it's frozen in place, you're either not going to have any brake, or you're not going to have a brake that releases fully, and it will burn your pads. Okay, so the back side of the disc feels good. There's no deep gouges in it. I'm gonna need a new caliper or a rebuild kit for this one, and that'll come with new boots. So I'll look around and see which way I'm gonna go with that. And I might have to replace these pads, because if that's been on fire, the material's probably been compromised, and it does look like it, judging by that tint there. These brakes did get really hot. Yeah, in fact, I just remembered when these got hot. Yeah, a few trips ago, same highway, I was towing the travel trailer, and I lost my clutch. So I didn't have the option to gear down for brakes, so I had to use my brakes on all the grades, and it did get hot. Yeah, the hydraulics Ford used on their master cylinders for the clutches leave a lot to be desired, but that's a story for another day. But that would have been when these got burned up. So that's it for my visual. I can't do anything more until I get some parts for it, but we can tell that the disc is alright. Bearings are smooth and quiet. The rotor either needs repair or replace. The pads are objectionable. They could be okay. They probably should be replaced. What sucks is they're not that old, and I bought the good ones for it too, so these were the expensive ones. So we just put it back over it. Swing that in place, and we find out where we misplaced our parts. There we go. So we make sure that tensioner's in place, and just tap this back in there. So when the bolt hole is lined up with that curvature there, then you're ready to put the bolt in. That locks it in place. You're done. And it's a special bolt with this rounded shoulder on it to fit in that curvature. Oh, nice. That bolt hole's been helicoiled. I don't know how somebody managed to mess one of those up. Not the helicoil, the mount. Great. I think I managed to mess up the helicoil. There we go. Okay, I'm going to get a lug wrench, tighten them up proper. I don't like using an impact to install aluminum wheels. I've seen them get crushed and destroyed, so I'll use a wrench. Then I will start you back up when we get to the rear wheel and check out that. Some of you guys might get a kick out of this. Oh, by the way, it's minor change of plans. We're doing the right rear instead of the left rear. There's more shade on this side. Anyway, with traditional 1-ton and 1-tons with the Dana rear end, if you've worked on them before, you know you got to pull the axle bolts out, slide the axle shaft out, take the lock nut, the bearing, and basically disassemble the whole side just to get the doggone drum off. Well, in later years they went to what they called a Sterling rear end. They did away with the Dana. They put the Sterling in there, and it has outboard brake drums, which is really nice. Now, this truck's too old for this rear end. Somebody, at some time in its past, swapped in a newer rear end. So, make sure there's no clips on it. Don't look like it. Just like an automobile. Pretty slick. That beats tearing this stuff apart any day. Alright. Okay. Look at the drum. It's smooth. No gouges, no cracks. Drum's good. Now if you're a real stickler and you insist on doing it right, there's nothing wrong with that. You can actually measure the distance apart. And if you're beyond the maximum distance, then the drum is too thin to be used and you need a new one. And that measurement's right there. Maximum diameter 307.1. And yeah, there's tools for that too. Okay. Shoes look fine. Plenty of meat on them. Primary one is on the front like it's supposed to be. Secondary on the rear. That's important because let's see, the distance between here and here is greater than the distance between here and here. If these shoes were inverted, which they can fit backwards very easily, the brakes would grab horribly. And often people just end up over adjusting the brake to compensate, and then you got a hot brake situation. So the short shoe goes on the front, long one goes on the rear. If all four of your new shoes are the same size, it doesn't matter. A lot of newer vehicles are like that. But if you do have two long ones and two short ones, shorties go on the front, long ones go on the rear. Okay, so to inspect our wheel cylinder, we need to peel back the boot. Let's see, it's dry in there. A little bit of crud, but it's dry. That's what we're looking for. If there was moisture in it, fluid, then the wheel cylinder would have to be replaced. The other side's harder to get to because the emergency brake arm is in the way. Let's see if my little tool will help. All that is a dust cover. An important one, but it's a dust cover. Okay. And it's dry, so we got a good wheel cylinder back here. However, I'm just noticing in my visual here that we got a broken spring. And here's the rest of it down here. Here we have. This is the spring go down. It goes across the bottom of the shoes. So originally it was hooked into there, and then these two were one piece. So I am gonna need a spring. And what sucks is sometimes you gotta buy a whole hardware kit to get one spring, but I'll see what I can find. So as you can see so far, it's been pretty important that I did my visual inspection on this and not just threw a new master cylinder on it and went back to work with it. Both brakes that we've checked have problems, and I still got the other two to do. Okay, I got both pieces of that spring out, so I can try to locate that. Putting the drum back on, I want to make sure this groove is clean, because it's easy to pick rocks and dirt and stuff up when you got them off. But this piece of the backing plate has to fit in there. Okay, I'm going to try something here. I'm going to start the truck up, put it in gear. I'm going to step on the brake, make sure the wheel stops. I want to check these rear brakes that are actually working, because this truck has some kind of a load compensator on it, to where the heavier the load in the bed of the truck or on the rear of the truck, the more rear brake is applied. So if that thing's stuck, it's possible we're not getting any juice to the wheels, and I'm just relying on my front brakes. So just to make sure I still have rear brake, that's my plan. Okay, I believe I felt that come to a stop. I'll review the video to make sure. But that's... Okay guys, I'm bringing you back for a little clip on the driver's side rear. Show you what I'm talking about when you need to replace a wheel cylinder. So you grab that cup, that dust cover. I wonder if the light's better. Yeah, that's better. Okay. And you peel it back. And you see, can you see it's wet in there? Yeah, down towards the bottom. See how wet that is? So that wheel cylinder's leaking internally, and it needs to be rebuilt or replaced. Normally you just replace them. Rebuilding's kind of a exercise in futility unless you really need to save that couple of dollars. So just thought I'd show you that. Well, here's the passenger side front, and it's in the exact same condition. Discs show they got a little warm. Same thing with the pads, and the rubber's burned right off of it, and it's all rusty like the aftermath of a fire. So it looks like I caught both of these front brakes on fire. So this truck darn near needs a full brake system. Lucky me.